Hi, my name is Alex Valentin, and for my case brief, I chose a case from 2018. It was parents versus RSU 75. So some of the facts for this case. This case is about basically parents suing the school for services that the school provided but failed to meet basically the needs of their student that were addressed in their IEP, and then some things that were found out about the student that weren't implied and implemented into the IEP. So initially, to start out, the parents did not support the idea of their child actually receiving special ed services. They were worried about their child being stigmatized. So eventually, when they did sign on, their child was initially diagnosed with a specific learning disability, specifically in the area of reading and writing. Um, Further testing additionally revealed that the student had average cognitive abilities. I believe on their score was about a 107, which is perfectly fine. He received in-school support per the IEP, was receiving special education, but as his special education continued over the years, the goals that were set out in his IEP, he continued to fail to meet those goals. Because of this, right, those IEP goals were not updated to match his progress. So each year, those goals basically advanced, even though his progress did not. So this happened for multiple years, starting in in elementary school and then continuing on to middle school. There was another diagnosis suspected by the special education teachers, but they did not initially carry out in identifying what that was. Eventually, they did. It was a an orthography disability on top of dyslexia. So that means that the student had a very hard time um, understanding written words and numbers. And on top of that, their recall and their ability to put that information that they had themselves, that they could say, phonologically, they could speak out this information, but they had a very, very difficult time when it came to writing and putting the words down onto paper. Despite this new diagnosis that was received by the student, no changes were made to their IEP. So even though he had a dyslexia diagnosis on the original IEP, it continued to say that it was a specific learning disability. On top of that, as each new year progressed, even though the student continued to not meet the goals set out for him by the end of each year, extended school year, or ESY, was never offered. So each year it talked about how the student would leave at the end of one year at one reading writing level, and then there would be a regression as any student, but especially for this student, severe regression over the summer, and each year they had to try to, kind of catch up. This sort of began to compounding, right? So now this student is sort of frustrated at the lack of development that they're making. So now some behavioral and emotional challenges start to develop. The student becomes resistant to being pulled out of the general education classroom to receive the special education that the school was providing to help meet those goals. And then finally, after some back and forth between the parents and the school, they both agreed to place the student at a fully other program, another school, I'm sorry. And then that school did not have the adequately trained personnel and professionals to deal with his specific learning disability, being dyslexia. So the issue at hand was that the district, the IEP and the placement student, failed to provide the student with a free and public access to education. Free and appropriate public education, because due to the fact that the goals were never updated and the student wasn't receiving the services that he should have been receiving, under IDEA, therefore, the parents argued that they would be entitled to compensatory educational services because in one of the programs that the student was placed in, it was actually at cost to the parents. So the holding, aka the decision, the student was not reasonably calculated to, the IEP was not reasonably calculated. So some of the testing that they had done was, again, the school was just sort of ignoring the dyslexia diagnosis and only specifically focusing on that specific learning disability. So the testing that they did was not accurate, and therefore it's not usable and doesn't fit the needs of that student, and again fails to provide that free and appropriate public education to the student. And because of that, now the parents were entitled to those compensatory services to make up for that. So especially in the pull-out model and the completely other program that the parents had to pay for their student to go, the holding or the final decision was that the parents were would receive their money that they had spent sending their student there. So some of the rationale, as the first thing, it basically states that the burden of proof, so the people that have to prove that there was a violation under IDEA, lies with the party seeking relief, in this case being the parents, because they are trying to, obviously, in this case, get those services for their son to continue their education so that their student continues to develop. But also additionally, because they paid money to send their student to a completely another program, they were looking essentially for that money back. Every student who is eligible for special education services is entitled under state and federal laws to receive FAPE, right, free and appropriate public education designed to meet their unique needs and prepare them for employment and independent living. Again, right, because the school failed to update that IEP, they couldn't accurately meet the needs and then prepare that student. And I brought up the cognitive ability in the facts because it goes into the rationales of why, in this case, it ended up siding with the parents. Because the student had average cognitive abilities, they could have orally received grade level information and then been able to process it and speak to and have someone describe for them. But the school simply focused on the specific learning disability that they first identified, not the new dyslexia definition or diagnosis that the student had received. And because of this, they had their student who was first diagnosed in, I believe, third grade, going to fourth, fifth, sixth, still had them at a first, second grade reading level. And in the takeout model, they were still trying to address that first, second grade reading level and not actually providing those services to keep that student at grade level. And so the parents that assert that despite the need to remedy his orthographic processing disability, it is a reasonable prospect for the student to aim for grade level advancement. They contend that only if his disability makes it unreasonable to expect advancement on par with grade level expectations does the IDEA permit the use of a lower standard, but it still requires a higher level of benefit than the former standard of meaningful, non-trivial benefit. It asserts that the district did not address the student's core orthographic weakness, dyslexia, and instead focused on developing his phonetic related skills. Essentially what that means is the school was ignoring the dyslexia and just trying to raise his reading level. But because of that, they therefore affected the rest of his classes and potential grade level development because they were just trying to meet and raise that reading level where the student could have been working on raising and understanding and raising his reading level while at the same time receiving as much grade level work, and because of his average cognitive abilities would have been able to also do that then work. Right, what it means, the school failed to provide free and appropriate public education to the student, and because of that, the parents are entitled to the compensatory services. So in this case, the money that they had spent sending their child to a new program, and on top of that, some more special education services. So my question for the class, whoever's listening to this, was that what additional changes should be made to the student's IEP to ensure that they continue to make progress, and what should be done to help the student meet the previously stated goals. So a big part of the problem was as they were focusing on essentially the wrong issue, those goals kept falling behind. So now the student, in this case, had fallen behind in other classes and other subjects. So what can be done by the school to help that student remedy and now basically catch back up to, in the areas he is able to his grade level peers? Thank you.